Warning: the words and lyrics written by 2D6 and its creators do not necessarily reflect the thoughts and opinions shared by Tanner Bivens.
Boba Fett sucks! Your dad got killed right in front of you. Boba Fett sucks!
Basically, it was only the extended universe that saved you.
Boba Fett sucks!
Hello, and welcome back to Star Wars Month. This time actually in December. So the last time that we were here, we talked about the Star Wars game that was released by Wizards of the Coast, the Star Wars Saga Edition that was a D20 system. And today, what I really wanted to talk about was the game that started it all, the Genesis. The game that started in 1986 and continued on until its final publication in the 2000s. The game that I'm talking about is the original Star Wars, the role-playing game. Created by the company known as West End Games, later changed to Womp Rat Press, you know, the things that we used to bullseye back home on our T-16s. The Star Wars role-playing game was made back in 1986. You know, around the time when D&D was really picking up as a game, and just 3 years after the final movie of the original series, Return of the Jedi, was released. During this time, we were living in a Star Wars world. Damn near everything had their hands on Star Wars. You couldn't throw a rock without hitting some sort of Star Wars merchandise. As such, it only made sense that an RPG would spawn from the game. The Star Wars role-playing game was the first and has been a mainstay in the role-playing game world even until the rights were passed on to other companies such as Wizards of the Coast. The game held on for years. It was originally created in 1986 and spanned all the way to 1996, 10 years after its release. Even a revised edition of the 1996 edition has come out just recently. This game has a very long lineage, and also it is often considered to be one of the greatest role-playing games of all time. And it certainly holds up to more than modest scrutiny. If I were to create a list of the top 10 greatest role-playing games of all time, Star Wars, the role-playing game, would certainly be a top contender to make that list. Star Wars not only brought one of the greatest, if not the greatest film franchises of all time to the role-playing game world, it also became one of the first games to bring the D6 system to the role-playing game world, a dice system that does not necessitate uniquely shaped dice for its game, thus making it a more accessible game to the general community. Star Wars role-playing game was the genesis for Star Wars game. It was the bar to which all other Star Wars games had to meet, excel, or fall short of. So really, after so many years, what else is there to actually say about this game other than the fact that it's phenomenal? Out of all the games I'm going to be looking at over this next month, this is the one that I find myself with the fewest things to talk about. Is the game great? Of course it's great. It's astounding. It was the game that people played when they wanted an RPG of Star Wars that spanned over 20 years. Oftentimes for more casual fans of role-playing games, it was the only other game aside from D&D that people actively knew about. I did talk in detail about the fact that there was no D&D equivalent for science fiction role-playing games in a previous video. Another reason I didn't quite tackle during that video was the fact that Star Wars pretty well satisfied most people's desires for a science fiction game for a very long time. The D6 system used in the game is one of the most synergistic systems to game combinations that you will find on the market. Really, the negative things that I can say about this game are minor nitpicks at best, and for the most part are kind of also confined to the most recent edition. So for the sake of fun, and to extend this video just a little bit longer, what are some of those nitpicks? Frankly, very minor at most, and some of them are mistakes that you can associate with just about any other role-playing game. For starters, as I said before, D6 systems can be a little boring for gamers who love to wield them oddly shaped dice. But ultimately, that really shouldn't take away from a system's quality just because you don't get to roll a dice in the shape of a dodecahedron. The artwork and the layout of the book for the final version can be a trifle lazy. The book is laid out with similar text and backgrounds that you see in a lot of science fiction games that were released at the time, and the artwork can be repackaged and is used throughout the book to spice things up, but really it's the same kind of pictures over and over again. But that honestly doesn't take away from most of it, and the previous games tended to have good layouts, so I really can't complain much about that one. This is going to be a short review, sadly, because I've already reached the conclusions here. There's not much to say about this game. It's obviously a crit. It's one of the greatest games out there, and it is one of the games with the longest lineage to it. It's similar to reviewing 2nd edition D&D. What is there really to say about this game that other people haven't already said or already know? The game is legendary in the role-playing game community and stands as one of the greatest games of all time. So, with that being said, I mean, I've said everything you can say about it. It's phenomenal, and if you ever want to play a Star Wars game, I recommend at least looking at this one. It might not be your favorite comparatively to the other ones. Maybe there's one that has a dice system that you're more familiar with, or maybe you just want a more modernized version of it. But really, all things considered, this is the Genesis, this is the original, so at least always put this under consideration. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe for more, and come back next week for another edition of Star Wars Month.